Hey everybody, this is Mike. Today is May 27th, and today we're going to be talking about rivers. And obviously I talk about rivers a lot, or even more specifically the Susquehanna River and the Susquehanna. I talked about that a lot in the most recent video. But now we're going to be a little bit more general, and we're going to dive into why it matters, and particularly like why it matters right now. I mean, I guess it always matters, but we're coming to a point where there's a revealing. There's a revealing as to what is the plan for life on Earth. If you've been researching conspiratorial topics for some period of time, none of this is a surprise. But now it's 100% out in the open, and there's no real denying it. And the game is shifting. It's leveling up, and so that's also true within us. So part of the revealing is the revelation of what's going on, but then the revelation is also going to be more so about well, what do we have? When a door shuts, a window opens. So there are four key points I'm going to try to cover today. It's going to be understanding rivers as synchronizing vessels, here on Earth, as an actual, maybe a tool might be a way of thinking about it, but as a mechanism as it relates to the flow of life. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, this is what I'm saying about rivers has always been true about life on Earth, but we also want to look at how this knowledge and this mechanism has been replaced, or a layer of reality has been placed on top of it, which has been used to dictate, hijack, whatever words you want to use, the flow of life. And so we're going to go and see that. We're going to see how that was done, most obviously first with money, and then we're going to look at what's going on right now with technology. And then we're going to really understand why it is important, because of everything which is happening right now, why understanding the nature of rivers and our natural world is our probably our most tangible, our most real navigation tool as we move through this period of time. And then lastly, the last point I want to get into is then how to apply this information, and begin to explore. Because again, we're all kind of in this together, and we're all learning this. We all have different pieces of the puzzle. So hopefully this is going to be a piece of the puzzle which can be added into, what you already know. So let's begin with rivers as a synchronizing vessel. Let's start with the obvious, that, we don't know where we are. We don't know what Earth is. We don't know what space is. We don't know how we got here. We don't know the body. We've got certain ideas, and maybe some of them are accurate, maybe some of them aren't, and maybe some of them are partially. But the truth is, we don't really know anything for certain. And so because of that, we want to, just be realistic with our observations and analysis. And then secondly, though, we also want to point out that when you're really paying close attention to how life works on Earth, navigating it isn't quite as difficult as what we are being led to believe. And what I mean by navigating is how does your life unfold? What sort of ways or tools that you can use to help synchronize your own life, your inner life, your actual experiential life with like a greater unfolding, because that's, you know, that's the synchronization. And as I said before, you know, it's really not that difficult, you know, navigating life. And I think one of my my favorite examples of, you know, what for me personally, what's very kind of like grounding in terms of like how self-evident life can be. And it's just like, you know, the food that's good for different parts of the body tend to look like the parts of the body they're good for. Like, it's that simple. And so we want to apply that kind of basic understanding of life being that, you know, it's symbolic, but it's literal. You know, it's a literal symbolism. You know, it's not like something like symbolism which was created in art form or in poetry or anything like that. This is like, you know, in the place which we're living, Earth. And so we want to think about this here. You know, this talks about the physical body and your physical experience, but then you also have this thing which is called life, the unfolding of your life, and that's a thing, right? You know, you get up and you do stuff, and you go to sleep, and then you do more stuff, and you know, you look back over a period of time, and be like, oh wow, look what I've done. Look where life has taken me. And so that like trajectory of life, you know, that's a thing. That's a real thing. We all understand it, but it's not a thing in terms of you know, something you can hold. And so going back to that example of you know, what's being what's self-evident as it's shown in the material world, we can then apply that. We can apply that as we navigate our lives. And so looking at symbols, if you will, literal symbols, would be water, specifically flowing water, that flow, that current. That is the realist expression of life. Not necessarily being alive, but the experience of life unfolding. You know, you can't grab a current. You can't hold a current. You can measure its speed, I suppose. You can feel it. You take a bucket of water outside of a creek, you know, and that current disappears. It's a thing, but it's not a real thing. And what it is it's a symbol of life. And when we begin to look back at some of the practices of other human beings that have lived on Earth, that have not lived during this time of really indoctrinated culture and understanding of reality, we begin to see over and over again the significance of rivers and lakes, but primarily rivers, and you know, two examples I like to use frequently is within the Vedic culture in India from, I don't know, was that like 3,000-4,000 years ago, and like the Celtic culture that was in Europe. And both of these different cultures, which seemingly are, you know, one and the same, or at least from a similar mother culture, they had an understanding of rivers as being maybe a connection to the divine, something transcendental, and often associated with a river is that of a goddess. And you know, there are a lot of ways to look at what goddess symbolizes or what it means. But I want to talk about you know, this self-evident truth, which is there is some mechanism which is controlling the unfolding of life. And, if that's like too out there for you, you could just think about that as like, the thing that makes certain your heart's beating, and, it makes the moon do whatever the moon does, and the sun do what the sun does, and the opening and closing of flowers, like, whatever that mechanism is, I'm talking that. But, if we want to make it more personal to the human experience, this idea of the interweaving of events and people throughout our experience of being in body. And so if you're paying attention, there certainly seems to be an ordering mechanism behind that. And there are lots of ways which this is described from different perspectives, what God's will. I'm particularly partial to the Tao Te Ching. That just kind of like speaks to me in terms of understanding this thing which really is which we're living within. In the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching, it says that the spoken Tao, the words you use to describe the Tao, is not the true Tao. And I always like that, and that's kind of what we're talking about, is the Tao being this mechanism, this flow of life, which just happens, and what we want to do is really be able to surrender ourselves into the greater flow and have that flow carry us. But going back to goddess, I think goddess is another symbol of this. From a basic level, the goddess in terms of like the capital G, not any one specific goddess, but like, the one goddess of the 10,000 names. She rules over life. She rules over birth, life, death, and then rebirth, that whole sort of cycle. And if you want to go and make that a little bit less metaphorical and just be like, that's life, everything happens, something happens, it lives, it dies, and you go and you do something else. And so with these ancient correlations between rivers or flowing water, flowing is a word which I like, and then the flow of life, and then the goddess rules over it. That is another indication or a hint, which is pointing at the significance of being connected to rivers, to flowing water, and being connected to the natural flow of life, in the same way that, like, eating foods that look like certain body parts will then assist in terms of getting the nutrients to that particular organ or body part. The current, the movement of water, the water is life, all of these sort of things, as we become more connected with that, in maybe new and different ways, what we're going to experience is a greater connection with the natural flow of life, because, as I said before, there's an artificial flow which is attempting to hijack the particular expression of life, the flow of life. It's always been there, but right now it's really taken it to the next level. So let's go in. Here's another thing. I like this article. I talked a little bit about the Vedic cultures, but here is this idea of within North American native peoples, the river is more than a person. It's a sacred place. There's this. There are many ways of interpreting this, and my personal opinion is we're so caught up in looking at it in this very kind of like anthropological, really like logic and rational grounded understanding, but there are clues all around that river and flowing water was just known to have a much greater significance within life. And what I like here is I don't know when this article was written, a handful of years ago, but it's talking about how there's a new lawsuit to give the Colorado River personhood status, which, you're still playing into the game of this artificial culture and reality by, you need to have a legal declaration for something to be so. But regardless, I like what I'm tickled by is how it folds upon itself is because a lot of the reasons for life as it is right now is the advent of the corporate entity having personhood status. And so we're seeing the flip of that, or the inversion of that inversion coming into existence. I just thought that was an interesting thing. But we want to talk about, let's go right here first. Let's go with banking. So, if the current is a representation of the flow of life on Earth, and by being integrated and connected on a significant deep level with this current, well, then what happens is we are naturally in the flow of that. And how we know that we are in flow, or one of the ways which we know, is through what's known as synchronicity, meaningful coincidence. I like to think of it as a double layer coincidence, a poetic coincidence. But it's an indication. The synchronicity itself is not like is not the mechanism. The synchronicity is the awareness to recognize that the mechanism is in play. And what we're seeing now is well, let's go to biomimicry. So biomimicry is this idea of purposefully designing human created structures in a way that reflect a natural order. And so it mimics this natural order. And this can also be thought of as sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is very much the same thing, of mimicking something that shows itself in the natural world to then become aligned with its qualities. And we see this biomimicry in all sorts of different ways right now. It's an interesting approach to design in multiple contexts. But we can see this beginning, this has been talked about a lot, this correlation of how just the phonetic sounds of the words we use to describe our money system. And our money system is what dictates the flow of life on Earth, or is a big dictator of it. And we see built into its language set, into its word set, is all of these double entendres to rivers. Through the banks run the currency, just as the current runs through the river banks. That's this kind of sympathetic magic. And it's also kind of like a biomimicry. And, banks have been around for a while, I suppose. And, the Templars are normally credited with being the first international banksters. And money has long been, a tool to control people. But we're seeing right now, that right now really being mimicked or replicated within the technological world. And that's what's happening right now, is this movement towards this one expression of the age of Aquarius in this very Saturnian, authoritative way, but linked in with technology. Right now, based upon this worldwide initiation, and what the plan is to further enhance everyone's reliance and connection to the computer, to the internet, to a digital world. And obviously we're using that right now. And, my personal plan is to be able to not use this as quickly as I can, and to use it as little as I can, but nonetheless. So what we see right now, best expressed is trying to hijack the natural flow of life, of river magic, if you will, is through all of these, really the social media and the advertising algorithms, the way that it can take all of this data. You mention something to a friend about a possible trip somewhere, and your phone overhears it, and the next thing you know, you're getting all your ads on whatever your social media is. And this is synchronicity. This is an inversion of this natural ordering process, which happens by, whatever it is you want to call it. And so it feels like synchronicity. You're like, oh wow, particularly if you're not if you're not paying attention, think about someone who doesn't necessarily question this, how their life is being handed to them by technology. But it seems very much like a synchronicity. It's like, oh wow, that's exactly what I needed. Yeah, a hotel room in St. Petersburg or what have you. That's the ad that shows up. And so it feels like a synchronicity. Likewise, how people are suggested for you to meet. But the bigger thing, or the stronger push on the technological level of really capturing this flow of life through dictating where that life and how that life is going to be expressed. It's always through money. It's ads. It's so you can go buy things. So it circles back to this whole sort of river biomimicry, this river sympathetic magic, just in the use of words. But that's not the only place. We go, and what's the what's the the biggest company on the planet right now? It's Amazon, which is very much in your face, a replica of river magic and biomimicry and sympathetic magic and all these sort of things. And we can see how Amazon is also really benefiting from the worldwide initiation. It really seems like all these folks in Seattle are strongly connected to this particular plan. Since we're mentioning Amazon, I just want to throw this out because this just kind of is interesting. We've got who is Amazon. We've got Jeff Bezos, and we can spend hours talking about him, and particularly his family lineage and connections to the CIA and the relationship with the CIA for professional services, and then also ownership of the Washington Post, which is a well-established outlet of CIA propaganda. So this also all goes back to John Dee being the original connector of state-sponsored spycraft and magic. But anyway, so Bezos. It's an unusual name, right? And I talked a little bit in some past videos looking at the name Gates. And so let's go look at Bezos. And it's not, this isn't exactly like a slam dunk, but, we're playing with ideas. We're loose with our ideas, and that allows us freedom to explore. And so the name Bezos, it's been brought up many times that it has this very consonant similarity to Beelzebub. Who's Beelzebub? Sometimes it's another name for the devil, similar to Satan. In demonology, it's one of the princes of hell. But Beelzebub is also known as Lord of the Flies. That's what that book, that title is making reference to, is Lord of the Flies. And Lord of the Flies was ultimately it was a book about survival of the fittest. And so we can see, if you're familiar with the the stories which are circulating about life in the company as an employee working for Amazon. You know, it's this survival of the fittest, Lord of the Flies culture. And, you know, this just kind of ties back into all of this kind of like Beelzebub sort of stuff. We'll go even a layer deeper, you know, right here. Here's another article. Ultra-competitive, boundary-pushing environment for white-collar workers sets Amazon apart. Will Amazon bring its Lord of the Flies culture to its new facility in Minnesota? Like this idea of connecting Lord of the Flies to Jeff Beelzebub and Amazon is you know, it's replicated you know, in multiple places. So Lord of the Flies, as a book, it deals with social Darwinism. You know, you're probably familiar with, you know, some of the critiques on Charles Darwin. You know, both his family lineage and then also how that type of how his the ideas he put forth, how influential they have been in terms of shaping our modern world, our modern culture in so many ways, social Darwinism being one of them. And social Darwinism is a tenet of at least Anton LaVey style of Satanism, which and also a lot of this Aleister Crowley type of practice of do as thou will, and so it's again, you know, it's not my job to tell anyone, you know, how to live or anything like that, but my personal opinion is you know, this is a very anti-human and anti-earth context, and all this is these are contexts in terms of, or lenses in which we interpret or view the outer world. And when we're given like a really, really strong context and where it's really bolstered, saying like this is the right one, you know, it becomes very ingratiated into one's consciousness in terms of how they see reality. You know, I don't subscribe to that. I recognize, I see where it takes place, but you know, I don't think that's very human. I don't think that's very true of a true reflection of our actual nature. So right now, what's happening is there's such a push. There's such a push to really move us in this certain direction. And you know, if you're paying attention, you know, you know what's up. You know what you don't want to do. You know what path is not the path to take. And you know, this is just what seems to be making the most amount of sense, at least to me right now, is nothing can be forced. It's not going to be forced. You know, those are like part of like the threats. You know, there was a trailer for a movie that came out, I don't know, this is like maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was called Gray State, and it was like this really like high quality 3-minute trailer of a movie this guy was going to make, of really doing a good job of showing what a dystopian future would look like in America. And then the guy mysteriously dies, and you know, it fueled a lot of conspiracy talk for a bit. You know, whether or not that whole thing was a false flag, that's my personal opinion. Or false flag's not a right, or a psyop. It's a psyop. But what it was done was, it was like to really to put the fear and the predictive programming into the minds of people who are beginning to wake up from the dream. But that's just another avenue back into the dream, and that's what we're going to seeing happening. There's all this fear of like, you know, you got to do this and you got to do that, and it's going to be mandatory and blah blah blah. And I don't think that's going to happen for a variety of reasons. One, the people that are ultimately behind this are in alignment with spiritual law, which how they practice it is through spiritual loopholes, and so they can't force anyone to do anything. Secondly, just from a practical sentiment, it's not going to be very feasible. But what does seem feasible, and what I think is going to be the most obvious expression of this, is the entire system, the entire dream system, is going to become completely in lockdown. And unless you comply to all of the measures that are going to be put in front of you, all of the medicines, all of the shots, all of the testing, you need that if you want to still play in that game, if you want to still play in that world. And there's a it's an interesting place when that's really gonna come to fruition, like when you're gonna have to make that decision, that choice, because for most of us, we've been born into this world, and we've been, it's been ingratiated into our understanding of how to live life and all the things we like and all this sort of stuff. And so it's like, I want that. I don't want to be excommunicated from it. And so that's where the pressure, that's the only real pressure. And that is going to be forced upon people, is like, you're going to be excommunicated. And at the same time, the only other images that we have been given on what life on Earth would look like without, the system is, they're not positive. They're not enjoyable images. That's what Lord of the Flies, the book, was about. It's we're seeing where that, or like, some sort of Stone Age type of existence. So those are the options. So like, that's what's been peppered in our minds, is like, this is the way life, this is what you want, this is what, if you want to still be part of it, this is what it's got to look like. And if you choose not to, well, your other options are kind of shitty. You don't want to live like that. Maybe you do. I don't know. I don't want to live like that. I want to live in something else. And so this is where the opportunity exists. It's like, well, this is a time of change, and immensely innovative change. That potential is at least it's written in the stars, written in the books they've told us to look at. And so if we're following a playbook, this is a time of great innovation, a time of the golden age of humanity. All of the things which we know could be the highest of expressions of human form. And the only way that can really truly show itself is to not be part of the dream world. So it's actually it's a benefit that what's going to come out, what people are going to be locked out of, is really all of the things which you need to be locked out of. Like, they're telling you, like, this is where the dream is. The dream, the demarcation for the false, sick reality, the inversion reality, is the world which you only get a ticket to if you go and you jump through all of the proper hoops. And there's just a complete, omission of what could be possible. So, I mean, that's a great idea, right? It sounds good on paper, I suppose, but then, where does the rubber meet the road, if you will? And that's why things like, why I'm talking about understanding rivers as a mechanism for flow in life. Because we don't know what the future holds. We know what one story which is being forced down the many people's throats of what the future is going to look like. But, that hasn't materialized yet. I haven't seen that, and I'm not feeding that. And, I want to feed something else, but I don't exactly know how you go from here to there. And that's when this whole idea of You just take the one step, which you have in front of you, just one, do the next right thing, if you will. And this is when this idea of being really in alignment with the true synchronizing mechanism of our more authentic reality. Like, I'm open to the fact that all this is a dream or a simulation or what have you, but you know what? This is still this is still where we're living it. So it's I want to, at least, the way I see it is that's what I want to be in alignment with. Part of what we're going on, it's set up in such a way, like right now is very much a time of this worldwide initiation for your own inner work. That's this opportunity which is being presented to us. But then there's also, how is this going to show itself in your outer world? And your outer world and inner world are intimately connected. But by connecting more so with the flow of life, your inner world and your outer world, they match up. And how we see that is, and how synchronicity works is, it's like it's a reassurance and a showing up of the window that opens when the door shuts. You don't know what it is, but it's gonna be undeniably obvious when it shows itself. And now more than ever, we need to really begin to utilize these mechanisms as we move through life, as the opportunities of new people, of new ways of living show themselves, and they should show themselves in the most effortless way. I mean, that's how you know it's right. This is not a time of will. You can't fight this beast to get back your system, which was always theirs to begin with. This is more of like an inner will of being able to hold the right inner space, the mental space, the heart space, in order to really flow into the natural current. And one of the reasons why I like to share so much of my own personal experience, and particularly during this time, is because I'm seeing that, I'm seeing that so obviously of just like opportunities within even like the dream system just presenting itself effortlessly to me as I just take the next right step. And so I share that as maybe a model, or at the very least reassurance, like, you're not crazy if you're seeing that as well. And that, yeah, like this is how this is unfolding. So let's go into rivers right now and connecting with them. So two things. So one is understanding hierarchies of rivers. There's, we have hierarchies of circuitry throughout us, like the circuitry in our brains are neural pathways. They're rivers. It's going through electrical impulses, like it's flowing of life, and it's happening internally, which affects us externally. It's all these different sort of flows, and there are multiple hierarchies. There are more foundational ones, and then they're like, more like everyday ones of how you live your life, and so all flowing water is part of this flow. There may be different layers in the hierarchy, but the truth is always self-evident, and it does not require tons and tons of abstract thought. Like, this is meant to be easy. Everything you need is in your own backyard. And so understanding, what you're near, like, what is the primary river, like, in your geography, like on a like, the physical level, like, what's the biggest river, what's everything like flowing into, and then understanding the creeks and the streams nearby you. This is your unique connection with the flow of earth, with the flow of life on earth. And so, understanding those hierarchies within your own life. And then I talk a lot about the Susquehanna River. And the reason being is, based upon all of the evidence, I've reached the conclusion, it's quite self-evident, that the Susquehanna River is the primary hierarchy in terms of influencing life on Earth. And we see that. And if that's the case, you would see physical or material markers. And, that's why I always go back to the age and the Herkimer diamonds and the Chesapeake Bay, the crater. There's in the Chesapeake Bay. It's also, Chesapeake Bay is on top of an ancient supervolcano. This has all the markers and the history. We can go and see that. We're all connected to the Susquehanna River, and that river has probably been the most influenced upon in terms of, literally, all of the things that have been done upon the rivers have been influencing the unfoldment of life on Earth. But there's still a deeper truth underneath all of this artificial or anything which was created by our hands. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing if it's created by human hands, but just go and look and see if it's in harmony with the rest of Earth. I would say all of our culture is an inversion from life on Earth, and that's where I hold in my imagination of what life on Earth would look like. But nonetheless, knowing your personal river is very important. And then also understanding the grandmother river, as I like to refer to it, the Susquehanna. I'm planning a trip in a couple weeks down to what I call the sisters. They're three sisters. They all formed in the same time period and all in the same general part of Earth, the eastern part of North America, and that's the Susquehanna, the French Broad, and the New River. And I plan on experiencing those rivers, the New and the French Broad, just in terms of from my own experience of connecting on that level with the flow. So then now the question is what does connecting mean? Well, one is you probably have a general sense of what connecting means just by hearing it, whether that's going to be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, or some combination of all four. But those are the four. These are the ways which you connect. And what happens is it's not I do this and then, but ta-da, a magic box appears and here's my compass. Maybe that's how it happens. I haven't seen that happen to me yet. But what happens is by investing your energies, by investing your mental energies. And so that's literally using your mind, your rational mind, your imaginatory mind, in terms of knowing what your geography looks like. Look at those rivers, look at their names, look at the history that has taken place upon it. Look at all of the people that have lived there. Begin to ascertain what are the underlying qualities of the events and the people and the geography and all of this stuff. It's all information, and it's going to tell you about the quality of the energy which you're tapped into as your life unfolds. And, that should be very exciting. That should be as exciting as learning your own inner world, learning your astrology, learning, about what was your childhood like, before age 7, memories from your parents or siblings, all of that should be exciting is pulling together your mystery. But then so is learning your river, and learning it intellectually. And then there should be a physical element with it, actually, spending time there, go and explore it, hike it, swim in it, raft in it, kayak in it, canoe in it. But you get the body in it and you experience it that way. And everyone's going to have their dominant way. Some people intellectually is going to be the easier thing. Some people doing the physical thing is going to be easier. You want to have an emotional connection as well. and that's a little bit trickier. But I mean, just by experiencing it physically and having fun, there's obviously emotion with that. But then also going to sacred places, sacred's relative to you. Where does it feel sacred to you? And then being in a certain emotional state, that's a connection. Recognizing that when you go to this river, when you go to this body of water, and you're just there, you don't have to do anything. I find walking very helpful. God, I never know how to say the guy's name. He's like a Buddhist monk, and he's famous for walking meditations. Thach Han, he's got 3 names. He's got something out in France, a village out in France of followers of him. But his walking meditations, that is a wonderful way of just like being in the presence of a river or in a natural like body of water. Like, that's a way of connecting the emotional world. And then also the fire element, because, air is mind, water is emotion, earth is material, but then the fire is like more spiritual, more experiential. It's just look at fire, how it's different than those other 3 elements. And, doing something special, that could also be incorporated with all of the other activities. But by doing that, by being conscious of what you're doing, what you are is you are connecting. You are connecting on a deep level. And how it's going to show itself is just like furthering your connection, not so much from like, taking it away from all of the connection, which is happening right now, just, me recording this, you watching this, we're deepening our connection with the artificial realm right now. We're swimming in it. But what we can do is we can ground, and ground with an expectation of what we're grounding into and why we're grounding. That is where we're going to really find, like the connections to something more fundamental and foundational than the artificial, which is being built right now. And this is what will assist us through this transitional period. A lot of people are going to be called to healing, My line of work puts me in touch with a lot of different types of healers, and particularly those who have a strong drive to want to heal the earth, and particularly the waterways. So, if that makes sense to you, if that fits into your experience, if that's true to you, I would imagine that's some of the most powerful and beautiful things people can do during this time. And I guess lastly, I want to go and round this out, talk about the rights of the 40th parallel. So I wrote this, like 3 years ago, and always when I wrote it, I had everything which I just laid out before you in mind. But some people that resonated with, some people are like, that's kind of, I was always surprised. People are like, that's nutty. Makes the most amount of sense to me. But anyway, this was one of the ways which I personally, have connected on a deep level with a river. I didn't do it consciously, like, oh, I'm going to write this so I can connect deeply with a river. No, it's just like, this is what happens. I make a lot of like art out of river rocks. This right here, this big stone, this is from the floor of the Susquehanna River, and so I did this on top of it. This is sand and paint, and I put in the golden ratio, the phi spiral, a golden rectangle on it. So that's just like, I show that as another way of connecting on a deep fundamental level during this time of like the upper level being all like, you know, they're working on. So anyway, so I want to go back to the rights of the 40th parallel. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think it's of great significance that, particularly if you're watching this, you know, this has to, if you're watching like right now, or in like what, 50 minutes, and something about this idea of rivers is resonating with you, and undoubtedly everyone's connected to the Susquehanna River, whether they recognize it or not, if they live, you know, in the area or not. And it is through this book, which is a way which you can connect with it. And so, and you know what? I have plans. I would love to be able to create other similar types of guidebooks for other rivers. And so what I did with this one is kind of tell like you know, I give some context of looking at a river. I don't think I use synchronicity in here, but I did use goddess a lot because, you know, the goddess symbology makes the perfect sense. But I identified locations along the river, which are, you can see there's actual pictures and then like maps, which I made, of certain locations, and describe the energy associated with it. And so by going to these places that have a certain energy, and you go there when you need to tap into that particular energy, like this one is destruction, where you go to let things go, where you want to destroy it. This location here is inspiration, where you go to be filled with inspiration. And this is a location for balance. And they're all based upon like very like logical reasons why that would be it. But this book is a way of being connected with the Susquehanna. In fact, I had visions. These pages of the maps, these full pages of the map are they're perforated, because I envision people like cutting them out and just like, you know, hang it on your wall or something. Not so much, not even if you go and you visit, and you know, all of these sites are within, you know, a handful of hours from Philadelphia and New York City and Washington D.C. But even if you can't, like, this is a connection. This is a energetic, symbolic connection. By reading through it, there will be a connection, but then there will also be maybe an inspiration to creating something similar, whether just for yourself or for your entire region, but within your own part of the world where you live. Likewise, if, you know, anyone is serious, you know, I'd definitely be interested in discussing with people if they wanted to go and do something similar and they needed a little bit of guidance, you know. I think this sort of stuff is really, really important during this time. So I think I covered all the points which I wanted to do today. And under an hour, so that was good. That was what I was trying to do for this talk. So yeah, make comments. I encourage you to begin to look at water, flowing water in a new way, and allow your own imagination and your own kind of like your own compass to come up with like new expressions in terms of utilizing our home, you know, our physical home here on Earth, as the way to navigate this particular time. So this is Mike, and I'm checking out.